first day was cold, windy, and I three-putted the last 3 holes to shoot 75, and then we had to tee off real early in the morning and want to go to the press because, you know, they weren't going to like what I had to say. And so I finally go over there, and by that time I'd had 2 or 3 vodkas and 7-Ups, and I didn't really give a darn.
He won 13 times on the PGA Tour. He had a swing so pure that Jack Nicklaus himself called it one of the 4 best in the game. He won a Vardon Trophy and competed at the highest level for 2 decades. He had the kind of raw talent that should have made him a legend for all the right reasons. But Dave Hill once looked at a fellow professional on the golf course and said, "I wanted to kill him." And he was not joking, not even slightly. Golf looks polite on television. The hushed crowds, the gentle clapping, the neat handshakes on the 18th green. But underneath all of that, Dave Hill was running a one-man war against everyone around him. Players, officials, architects, course designers, the whole organization. And today we are going to name the 5 men he hated most, starting from the bottom and working all the way up to the rivalry that got genuinely ugly. If this is already feeling like it could go sideways, smash the hype button and give this video some hype right now. It only gets wilder from here. Dave Hill grew up on a 60-acre farm in Jackson, Michigan. He was one of 6 children and life was not easy. He had a severe stutter that followed him all the way through to the 8th grade. And in a small town, that kind of thing marks you. It made him an outsider from the start. It made him defensive in ways that never really went away. He described himself as a terrible loner, and that isolation hardened into something much more dangerous once he started competing seriously. He turned professional in 1958, and almost immediately he was in trouble. In 1961, the same year he won his first title at the Tucson Open, he paid approximately $1,400 in fines just for destroying equipment. At $100 per broken putter, that was nearly half of his first place check. Most men celebrate their first win with the people they love. Hill spent the money before he had a chance to enjoy it, one snapped club at a time. That set the tone for everything that followed. Hill was already showing the tour that he was going to do things his way, regardless of what it cost him financially or professionally. In 1963, after the death of his father, things got even darker. During the Frank Sinatra Open Invitational, Hill was in the middle of a prolonged putting slump, and his mental state was fragile. He walked up to PGA Tour director Joe Black on the 18th green and told him straight, if he missed his final birdie putt, he was going to break his club. Black tried to talk him down. Hill missed the putt, snapped the putter clean over his knee right there in front of everyone, then finished the hole using the broken shaft. He collected a 2-month suspension for his trouble. That was just 1963. He still had decades left to go. Here's the thing about Dave Hill that makes this story genuinely complicated. He could play, nobody disputes that. He was elite, consistently, for years. But he lit his own career on fire, over and over again, and then complained loudly about the smoke. Every single time he had a chance to step back and collect himself, he stepped forward. Every time he could have stayed quiet and let something go, he opened his mouth. And every time someone pushed him even slightly, he pushed back twice as hard and usually said something he could not take back. He kept beating himself. And that is the pattern. It ran through everything he ever did on a golf course. Now it is time to meet the 5 men who felt it most directly. We are going in reverse order. Number 5, Jack Nicklaus. This one is different from the others on this list. Dave Hill did not hate Nicklaus the way he hated some of the men below. He respected him genuinely. He admired him. He acknowledged that Nicklaus could finish a hole better than anyone else alive. And when Nicklaus publicly called Hill's swing one of the 4 best on the entire tour, Hill did not argue. He accepted it because it was earned and he knew it. But here's where it gets complicated fast. Hill could not stand what Nicklaus represented inside the PGA structure. In Hill's view, Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player were the Big 3, a protected class of golfers who operated under a completely different set of rules than everyone else. If Dave Hill had a meltdown and tossed his ball out of a bunker in frustration, he got fined, disqualified, and publicly shamed. But in his eyes, the big names never faced the same consequences when they stepped out of line. They were untouchable in ways that Hill, with all his talent, never was. And then came the 1969 Ryder Cup at Royal Birkdale. Nicklaus made his famous concession on the final hole, giving Tony Jacklin a short putt and turning what should have been a United States victory into the first tie in Ryder Cup history. The world called it a gesture of pure sportsmanship. U.S. Captain Sam Sneed was absolutely furious, and Hill agreed with Sneed completely. To Hill, Nicklaus had no authority to make that call on behalf of the entire American team. One man had unilaterally decided the outcome for everyone else. And in Hill's mind, that was precisely the kind of thing the Big 3 did. because they genuinely believed they were above the rest of the players on that team. So Hill said what he always said. He let the world know exactly where he stood, and he delivered one of the most famous backhanded compliments in the history of sport. As a player, he is the greatest of all time, but as a golfer, I cannot even put him in the first 50. To Hill, being a player meant being a polished scoring machine who cared about winning titles and protecting his image. Being a golfer meant something deeper, something rawer, something earned through honesty and struggle, something that Nicklaus, comfortable behind his corporate image and protected status, had never bothered to find. Number 4. Peter Thompson. Peter Thompson won 5 Open championships. He was cerebral, measured, and completely stoic. He carried himself like a man who had decided long ago that he was above petty arguments with difficult people. That attitude, all by itself, was enough to drive Dave Hill absolutely mad. In 1971, Hill traveled to Australia to compete in several events, including the Wills Masters and the Australian Open. The two men clashed verbally at the Wills Masters, exchanging what reports described as nasty words over aspects of play and etiquette. That was just the opening act. The following week at the Australian Open, they were paired together for the opening round. The Sydney press called it the Cold War, and that is exactly what it was. The round began without a handshake on the first tee. Both men stood there and simply refused to extend even that basic courtesy. It was a deliberate statement from both sides before a single shot had been struck. They played 18 holes in near total silence. No conversation, no small talk, just the occasional murmured acknowledgement of a decent shot, and absolutely nothing more. Thompson saw Hill as a loud, uncouth American whose behavior was an embarrassment to professional golf. Hill saw Thompson as a protected establishment figure who used refined silence as a weapon and looked down on anyone who chose to speak honestly instead of elegantly. Someone who acted like the rules of decorum were beneath him while judging everyone else by them without mercy. So Hill did what Hill always did. He refused to play along. He dragged Thompson into his world, a world of open tension, public awkwardness, and newspaper headlines that had nothing to do with anyone's scorecard. The Cold War became the story of the week. Thompson had wanted to be above it all. Dave Hill made certain he could not be. Number 3. Bernard Gallacher. The 1969 Ryder Cup at Royal Birkdale is famous for Nicklaus's concession, but what happened earlier that same week between Dave Hill and a young Bernard Gallacher nearly dismantled the entire competition before it reached its famous ending. Gallacher was young, confident, and completely unafraid. He refused to be pushed around by anyone. That was always going to be a problem when Hill was involved. British captain Eric Brown had already set a hostile tone by ordering his players not to help the Americans search for lost balls in the rough. From the very first green of Hill's match, it was ugly. Gallacher's partner asked Hill to stop moving during his putting routine. Hill's partner refused to hold the flag for Gallacher. Standard courtesies vanished immediately. Then on the 7th hole, Hill missed a putt and immediately holed out without waiting his turn. Gallacher called it. Words flew. Hill's partner picked up Gallacher's ball marker and told him he could have the hole in the goddamn cup. Then Gallacher conceded a putt to Hill's partner, specifically to stop Hill from watching the ball's line. It was legal, it was clever, and Hill could not let it go. He turned to Gallacher and said it plainly. If you say one more word, I'm going to wrap this one iron around your head. The PGA of America stepped in. They told Hill directly, apologize to the British side or you are off the team entirely. Hill apologized through gritted teeth. His contempt for what he called the fussy etiquette of British golf never softened for a single day after that. Number 2. JC Sneed. By 1991, Dave Hill was in his mid-50s and competing on the senior PGA Tour, the Legends Circuit, the place where veterans were supposed to wind down and enjoy competing without all the chaos of the main tour. Everyone who had followed golf over the decades knew who Dave Hill was. They knew what to expect from him. He had not changed even slightly. The senior tour had not mellowed him. Time had not mellowed him. If anything, he arrived on that circuit carrying every grudge, every fine, and every frustration he had accumulated over 3 decades of playing the main tour. He was still looking for a fight. At the Transamerica Senior Golf Championship at the Silverado Resort in Napa, California, Hill was on the driving range warming up before his round. JC Sneed was hitting balls from the other end of the range. Sneed's shots kept rolling too close to the space where Hill was standing. In professional golf, practice range etiquette matters deeply. Hill perceived it as a deliberate sign of disrespect from a man who should have known better. He yelled at Sneed. Sneed did not stop. He yelled again. Sneed kept going. And then Dave Hill, a man in his mid-50s, grabbed a golf club and charged across the entire driving range at JC Sneed, who was a considerably larger man than Hill. They went at it, punching, wrestling, moving across the ground together. Caddies and fellow senior tour legends were forced to physically pull them apart. By the time the fight ended, both men were covered in mud, and everyone who witnessed it stood in complete disbelief. This was not a young hothead losing control in the heat of a final round. This was Dave Hill, decades into his career, still absolutely unable to let anything go. The driving range brawl became one of the most retold incidents in senior tour history, and it proved beyond any doubt that Hill's aggression was not something youth had driven or pressure had created. It was part of his foundation. Number 1. Chichi Rodriguez. There is no feud like this one in the history of professional golf. No animosity this sustained, this deep-rooted, or this violent in its language. And it began of all places with the two of them being roommates early in their careers. In those early days on tour, Dave Hill and Chichi Rodriguez shared a room and were simply two young professionals trying to grind their way up. But as Rodriguez blossomed into one of the most beloved entertainers the sport had ever seen, everything between them broke down completely. Rodriguez did his sword dance with the putter after sinking big putts. He chatted with galleries throughout rounds. He performed at every opportunity, and Hill despised every second of it with an intensity that only grew over time. To Hill, golf was a grim and serious technical profession that demanded absolute silence and total focus from everyone on the course. What Rodriguez was doing was not entertainment. It was psychological warfare dressed up in smiles. Hill did not see a charming performer connecting with fans. He saw a man deliberately destroying his concentration while the crowd applauded him for it. The explosion came during the final round of the 1970 Kaiser International at Silverado. Hill was in deep contention for the title. He formally protested to officials that Rodriguez was committing an excess of actions not customary in golf. The officials noted the complaint, but the back nine became a battlefield anyway. The two traded insults out on the course. Rodriguez eventually called for a tournament official and asked to be separated from Hill, saying he no longer wished to play beside a man he found abusive. Hill, furious and distracted, triple bogeyed the 11th hole and missed a playoff by a single shot. When the round ended, PGA Tour officials were so concerned about what might happen publicly that they put Hill on a golf cart and drove him away from the 18th green before a brawl could break out in front of the gallery. It did not fully prevent what followed. Reports indicate a physical confrontation still took place inside the locker room that evening. And then in 1972, Hill sat down with Sports Illustrated and said things no professional athlete had ever publicly said about a fellow competitor. He said that when Rodriguez called for the official, he should have buried my club in his head. He said that if he had followed his impulses, he would have literally whipped the intestines out of him. He said that what remained of Rodriguez would not have filled a cigar box. These were not throwaway lines. Hill meant them and kept repeating variations of them for years. Rodriguez had grown up in poverty in Puerto Rico and used entertainment as a connection to fans and a survival tool. Hill had grown up on a Michigan farm and saw golf as solemn, demanding work. Neither man was entirely wrong about the game itself, but only one of them told a national magazine he would have gutted the other. Hill never apologized for those words. He never softened them. He repeated them across interviews for years as if they were simply facts he had observed about himself. Dave Hill was his own worst enemy from the very beginning to the very end. He had the swing. He had 13 wins. He had a Vardon Trophy and the genuine respect of the greatest player who ever lived, but he burned through so much of it. The fines, the suspensions, the brawls, the $3 million antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour that forced the tour to build fairer and more clearly defined disciplinary procedures for every player who came after him. And Hazeltine, the course he publicly called a ruined farm, after finishing second to Tony Jacklin in the 1970 U.S. Open, the course where the Minnesota Gallery followed him around mooing and ringing cowbells for days on end while he competed, was later extensively redesigned based on the very criticisms that earned him a fine. The architect he insulted, Robert Trent Jones, became a symbol of everything Hill believed the establishment protected from honest scrutiny. He was right about far more things than people credit him for. He was almost never easy about any of it. Players today benefit from clearer rules, fairer procedures, and less arbitrary punishment, partly because Dave Hill decided to take the PGA Tour to court. But the game is different because of him. More structured, more accountable, and at least a little more honest about what goes on underneath the polished surface of professional golf. He was exactly what he always claimed to be, an honest man in a sport that sometimes preferred a beautiful lie. That, for better or worse, is a legacy that is genuinely worth remembering. If you made it all the way through this one, you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us which Dave Hill moment shocked you the most. We have got plenty more stories like this one right here where this came from.